We can now see when we scan a rock how much SCU of cargo is in that rock. 07 Star Citizens. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I hope you've been able to get into 320 PTU, or at the very least, getting ready for Starfield, which as of the time of recording this, comes out in about 12 hours. I know it's a game I'm really excited for, and I'm sure a lot of you out there in Star Citizen world are also very excited. But before we can start playing that, there's some pretty huge things that happened in 320 that aren't really in any patch notes and not many people are talking about, but are incredibly important if you are a mining person. So today we're going to go over some of the changes and talk about what this new world is going to look like with mining, because it is very different, sort of a continuation of what we saw in the 319 mining changes that happened a couple of months ago now. Before we begin, if you want to catch me live, go head over to twitch.tv/Croncierge. I stream most days. We're going to be streaming Starfield from tomorrow pretty much as soon as it comes out, as long as my key arrives. And of course, we're going to be playing a lot of 320 PTU as it continues onwards. So, firstly, the updates for mining in 319 were very extensive. The goal of a lot of the mining changes that we saw in 319 were designed to bring everything into a bit more of a, well, fun state. They wanted to make the mole an actual viable ship to use. They wanted to make multi-crew mining in general a thing that you want to do. They wanted to make gadgets more important. They wanted us to be able to have, you know, more than one setup for our lasers and mining modules. And they did an okay job, but there were some issues. Firstly, we had an issue where there was pretty much no reason not to run triple focus 3s on a laser, especially if you were multi-crewing and completely maxing out your green bar for your optimum charge window. In addition, there was obviously some balancing issues between the prospector and the mole. It wasn't really certain if it was still worth multi-crewing the mole a lot of the time, as you were sort of just better off getting multiple prospectors to go into different locations and look for some smaller rocks that you can mine faster. Plus, there was a lot of other issues with the fact that they changed how resources weighed. So even though there was a rock that had a ton of mass, it would have less SCU than some other rocks, which is fine and works like in a science perspective, but none of that stuff was sort of shown to us. We had to work that out through like data mining and stuff. There was also an issue a lot of people had, especially my good friend Red Monster, where it was kind of just luck of the draw whether or not you were going to find good rocks or not. They had completely changed the system to where pretty much every rock that is got good quality stuff or even slightly good quality stuff could just be found everywhere. The type of the rock essentially did not matter. You know, of course, there were some good changes here, of course. It was a big game changer in terms of, hey, there is the possibility of multiple laser like loadouts being relevant. We also had the entire mining economy change with the way that things were worth money, where now Quantanium was kind of like, hey, you've found a little bit of treasure of Quantanium, but you're actually after a lot more rocks than you were previously, a lot more minerals. Well, in 320, a lot of this has changed. The main idea of the rebalancing of mining is the same, but a lot of things within it have been altered. I want to start off with one change that is absolutely massive, and it's mostly just a quality of life update, which is a small UI change that they've added to the mining screens. We can now see when we scan a rock how much SCU of cargo is in that rock. Thank you so much, CIG. I was mentioning just earlier, we had these changes in density of minerals that made it so that you didn't really know how much SCU you were going to get out of each rock if you weren't using a calculator. Well, now they tell us. I think this is really important when you get to the sort of stage of trying to figure out what rocks are actually worth mining, because you may find a rock that you can crack that's, you know, got a fairly decent amount of agricium SCU compared to one that's significantly harder to crack and has much less gold. You know, you can spend your time a bit more wisely that way, and you don't need a calculator that entire time doing that work. It's just faster, it's better, it's fantastic. Such a small change, but an incredibly important one for the game. But now let's talk about the actual meaningful changes that are going to change how you actually break rocks. First off, instability was incredibly broken in 319. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work at all. So they've changed it. It's calculated completely differently and it works differently. Now, instability, the way that it works is whenever you put charge into a rock, the instability will change the rate at which it goes up, not down. This matters a lot because it means instability does what it really should, which is it risks you getting into the overcharge area. It's really important that we have mechanics like this in the mining gameplay loop. The important thing that it changes as well is because in 3.19, size 2 mining lasers ended up getting a higher mining laser power in order to break bigger rocks, laser power affects instability, if that makes sense. So it is much more important now that when you are breaking small rocks, that you have as little laser power as possible, because otherwise you are not going to be able to control it. It is going to go in the red and you are going to explode it. The smart ones among you may realize that this means the mole and the prospector have much more defined roles now. The prospector is there to break small rocks easily. The mole is there to break large rocks easily. And both of them sort of have this difficulty in the middle ground, which I think is really good. I think it's really important to have that. It is no longer a case of you are either prospectoring or moling. There's reasons for both of them, and the profit is relevant. Now, there is one thing I do want to mention, which is that with testing loadouts at the moment, which is very hard in the PTU right now, so probably going to take another couple of weeks before we set on some decent loadouts for the new system. You can, of course, put size 1 mining lasers on your mole. Obviously, you lose out on the extra power that you would get from the size 2s, but it means you can break small rocks more easily. I think this does a little bit de-incentivize people from using the prospector at all, because if you are going to solo mine in this instance, and I hate to say this, you may be better off in a mole. I personally have lots of issues with people solo moling. If you have this extra access to these size 1s, it makes it a bit too easy. So I would actually not be opposed to the mole not being able to put size 1 lasers onto the hard points. I think it would make the roles between the prospector and the mole a lot more defined. As you can tell with all of this, this also means module choice, laser choice, gadget choice even also matters a lot more now, especially because, and I have not been able to test this, but I've been told by some people that have done some data mining that you could no longer get the green zone above 50% of the entire bar. So that entire meta of, multi-crewing a mole and just going focus 3s on every laser so that you can get maximum optimum charge window is no longer possible. I do hope that is the case. Once again, I have not tested it myself. I have not been able to. The PTU has been very rough, but it's super relevant. Another thing I want to mention here, especially about the instability changes that they've applied to this patch, is right now in the PTU, they're actually testing them over what they want them to be. Here's this post from Spectrum from a buyer of red about the 320 mining. First off, instability now scales with rock size, which is incredibly important. To better understand the effects of the stability changes, instability values have been increased by a factor of 100 to really test your ability to cope and counter the mechanic. Right now, they are way overdone, which makes sense. They've multiplied them by a factor of 100. So I think if they bring it down to about 50% of what it is currently, it'll actually be pretty solid. I was struggling to crack small rocks with even a Hofstede 1, which has the lowest power of any laser, and I even chucked on like an 85% laser power module on top of it. Next part I want to talk about is distribution changes. So there's two things that have sort of happened here. Firstly, rock type matters again. This was a thing that happened before 3.19, where you would scan a rock, you would see that it's a E-type, and you would know that it's going to have likely these types of minerals in them. In 3.19, that got removed. It is back now, which I really like. It makes asteroid mining a lot easier. It makes surface mining a lot easier as well, just because you can sort of scan them from afar and know if that's the kind of rock you're after. Now, at the moment, you're still pretty much after every rock because you're after the 4 expensive elements. But this is a really important thing in future if you're after, specifically tungsten, titanium, that sort of stuff, as you may want that for crafting or for some sort of trade missions in the future. I know it's Star Citizen. Talking about future stuff is sometimes a bit annoying, but I think it's relevant right now. The other part about distribution is the rarities of minerals appear to be more consistent. From my testing, which, to be fair, I've had maybe 5 hours total of actual active mining testing in the PTU so far, I have found rare minerals significantly more of the time. At the very least, I have been finding rocks that I've been able to break with a single laser that have a decent amount of C tier minerals, which is pretty good. You'll still make 80 to 100k on those rocks. Now, this could be an issue with testing. It could be that I haven't had enough of a sample size. Hopefully, when Red Monster SC, which I'll direct you to his channel, when he gets back from his paternity leave and posts all of his mining stuff, he'll have some more information for us. So I do hope that you go and check that out, because that's going to be extremely helpful for any miners out there. So what does this mean for the future of mining? Well, hopefully with this update and a couple of tweaks, it's going to mean a couple of things. Firstly, that the prospector and the mole now have more defined roles, and people will stop complaining about either one being more powerful than the other. The prospector excels at small rocks, the mole excels at large rocks, and eventually the Orion excels at even larger rocks. I also hope this will give us more depth with our multi-crew mining fleets, as we have a lot more to think about now in terms of where we want to mine, what we want to mine, and how we're mining it. Pretty much every single stat for mining now matters, except for like extraction laser power, which I'm still hoping they do something more with. I also think in general, from what I've been able to figure out, I think mining in the PU is going to become a little bit more profitable. At the very least, now that people will be able to determine, hey, this rock with a worse mineral is worth more than that rock because of the SCU count, that people will be a bit more open to mining things that they previously weren't. People are going to be a little bit less picky. I cannot stress just how much I am so happy that we have that little SCU counter there. Now, there is still a ton more mining testing to be done. Likely, as we've seen in this forum post, the instability changes are going to be changing again. This also does not go into any other details about mining, like it's possible there's been some changes with Janolite. I've heard people talking about how asteroids now once again have hand minables on them. But I'm really happy that they're continuing once again to take a feature which came out in the previous patch to, in my opinion, mostly praise. And they're taking all of the worst parts of that, and the literal following patch, they're fixing those, or they're at least testing things. So a huge kudos to CRG for doing that, especially with mining, which is already pretty much the most fleshed out mechanic in the game. Let me know in the comments below how you've been finding mining in the PTU, or if you're able to participate in the next couple of waves as they come out. Give these sorts of things a go. Let us know what you find. It's likely that these are not all the changes. That's it from me, guys. Hope you have a fantastic day. I'm going to go and edit this and then go to sleep because I need to be awake for Starfield. So I'm going to leave you guys there. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a like. Subscribe to see more Star Citizen videos from me and Starfield content over the next couple of days, probably. And I'll catch you guys in the verse. Have a good one.